nowadays, when they have certain banners, certain parts of the lodge, they'll actually use a cipher, which is made completely of right angles and straight lines. And this is called the Ike Bakia cipher.
Right.
And this again was taken from Agrippa. So it's not really a stretch, to see that if they were using the ciphers that came through this guy, that they would be using other forms of divination or other forms of magic that he'd adapted.
Yes.
And again, as we were saying, incorporating them in a kind of veiled way. So, yeah, this is kind of the final kind of proof in the pudding for me, was I realised exactly where this Freemasonic system had come from.
Yes.
And how it had been created, and how it had been kept secret as well. So, for the first time in a couple of 100 years, possibly, somebody who isn't initiated has started to understand what some of their symbols mean.
Yes, yes.
Which is quite interesting.
Yes, indeed.
So yeah, this is the key part of it, really, is to see how all of these systems were set up through the Middle Ages, and how we can actually, if we're intelligent with the sources that we read, we can actually connect that to magic, which is done by very many different fraternal, chivalric, and groups and societies.
Yes.
And so it's a fundamental key, is not to have to read through all of their books, but to be able to find out information on individuals who may have had a big part in setting up the systems which we now see kind of hold us in bondage.
Yes, and that the system also has its roots then in it's basically a combination between, first of all, it's spawned out of the church itself. If we go back and talk about Tryphaeus again, then, because he was encouraged, if you will, of a lot of the clergy and to go into this system, develop it, and then this has trickled down through Agrippa and then picked up by Freemasonry, who has constructed a lot of the cities, basically, or very important key places within a lot of cities. So it's a line here, a connection between these different fields, basically.
Yeah, and so that's the only way to really understand kind of how it's gotten to the present state, is to go back to its origins.
Yes.
For me, researching it, that was the ultimate truth. Was I could look at it all I wanted and see what I wanted on a speculative level. This kind of looks like that. It kind of looks like this. But symbols have both speculative meanings, associative meanings that individuals can have, and also operative meanings. So meanings which are actually built into it as a means of communication by the original designer.
Yes.
And so they're very, very different, obviously, the operative meanings of a symbol between the associative meanings. And so that's really the key. If we're to study symbolism and how it's been employed in the modern world, and how it's been employed in a very unbalanced way, then we have to go back and try to understand more of the operative symbolism of not just what is being done, but how it's being done. And so, yeah, I really do think that there's a lot of us now in this field studying a lot of different things, and there's going to be more and more to come all the time.
Yes.
This is just the beginning.
Yes. I mean, I read a little bit in let's see what his name, Martin Short's book. It's called Inside the Brotherhood. This was based on a documentary with the same name that I linked up on redicecreations.com a while back. And he goes into a little bit also about the fact that some Masons around, I think it was around late 16 or early 7. No, this was actually middle 1700s, I think. They were talking about the fact that they were potentially, being hijacked in a number of different ways. There have been people talking, of course, that the Illuminati, the Sun Order of this, so to speak, has gone in and consequently hijacked the structure of Freemasonry, and then consequently what has grown out of that is the much of the system that we see today, and I think that's interesting also to kind of note there in a way, because if this has its root back in the church in that sense, it has been, it's many levels down the road where this system has been hijacked by different people who have different agendas, if you will, so to speak. And it doesn't, again, it just...
For some reason, obviously, it was this system, as we've talked about before, with simplicity and efficiency.
Yeah.
Even though, as you say, this is kind of a ball that's been picked up and adapted by different people. Obviously, there was some reticent and obvious power inherent in this symbol for it to be used and for it to carry on for so long. So, it's fascinating. You can see that there's the ideological connection with it, but also the actual importance of it for everybody to pick it up and say, hey, this is important.
Yes.
And to utilize the same system in some way,
we can go in a number of different ways. From here, we can talk a little bit more about Paracelsus, perhaps, and his particular system. Is there any big difference? I guess he went into the medical aspect to all of this a little bit more. Isn't that right?
Yeah, I mean, if we use the metaphor again of kind of the medical industry using the snake,
the
yes. Left-hand snake on the rod, and we use the pharmacy with the right-hand snake. We have Paracelsus was kind of the more intuitive, the right-brained sort of student, and Trithemius very much he saw himself as kind of the father of a divine trinity,
Yeah.
He saw himself as the repository of both of these levels of knowledge, but actually only taught them separately to his two most important students. So Paracelsus obviously went more with the kind of alchemical concoctions for health and to do with the body, and lots of toxicology and lots of other fields kind of developed from Paracelsus. And there's even still part of the intestinal tract which is named after Paracelsus. So he went down that avenue, whereas Agrippa went down the more kind of magical left brain avenue of it.
Yes.
The left-hand path.
Yes.
And so, we can just see it through these three people who had a huge effect on occultism for hundreds of years after them. Very, very big minds, and all very, very connected with the church, as you say.
Yes.
And when we get back down to the roots of the church, again, I mean, Michael Tsarian is really starting to pin this down in the minds of people. And you can see it again, as we talked about with the symbolism, the whole concept of the solar male deity, the unbalanced worship of this. It works on every single level. So, whereas the name of the god might change, the psychological breakdown of that god is always the same. He does the same things to the people, and asks the same sacrifice.
Hello, Dan, you're there? So we have Daniel with us again. We lost the connection. What happened, Daniel?
My phone seems to have stopped working. Yeah, it's completely dead.
Okay.
No dial tone. I've tried to unhook. It's just a landline, so I mean, I've tried to unhook the landline, put it back.
Okay.
But yeah, there's a few ticks coming down my phone, and it's fried.
Because we had a really weird signal on our end as well. It kept dialing back and back and back in frequent, more frequent than usual. It sounded really weird.
I've got no idea, but all I know is I have to buy a new landline phone now.
Okay. So do you think it's the phone itself that fried, or maybe the line just dropped for some reason?
My phone, there's no sound coming out of it.
No sound.
There's no dial tone. There's not even a feedback from the speaker.
So the phone is damaged, basically.
Well, the phone was sitting on my lap, so
right.
The phone couldn't have been damaged, It's very strange.
Huh.
I've just had an overload on a line or something, but my house phone will not work anymore.
Okay. Well, let's proceed with this way, because we were just getting into some really interesting material. And so isn't it interesting that we're just talking about the fact that this is material that hasn't been highlighted for hundreds of years, as they said,
Yeah, I think it was exactly at the time that I actually said "aton." The phone cut out as well.
There we go. Okay, well, make of it what you will. We might have as I said, we have had a few articles up on this on Red Eyes, of course, but the FRA, it's called Försvarets radioanstalt. That's actually translated is the Swedish National Defense Radio Agency over here, at least. They've been pushing hard to get in some laws to be able to wiretap phone calls and internet traffic, what have you. So I wouldn't be any surprise if someone is listening in. You can never know.
No, it's a great compliment if they are, you know.
Yeah, of course. Hope they'll learn something if they're listening.
Yeah, and if they see us as a threat as well, that's even more of a compliment.
Yeah, of course. I mean, let's pick up on the thread and continue here. We have a little bit time left, and we have a few things that we do want to cover, and we can do this over cell phone, no problem. This is fine. One of those things you mentioned, of course, Aton, and it's obviously always difficult to get back on track when you're interrupted like this. But we can go into a little bit, I guess, or talk about, because we were into talking about the church connection to all of this, of course, and the origins now. This have been trickled down. But the geomancy of churches itself is a really key and a big area in this research, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. There's a guy who I've been in correspondence with recently, a guy called Tom Brooks, and he wrote a book called The Hand of Man, which in it, for the last maybe 50 years, he's been studying the geometry of sacred sites in the UK. And he doesn't really believe in kind of the higher or larger aspects of it and the whole energy system of the planet. But because of this, it does make him very definitive on the geometry, because he's completely centered on that. And what he's found with his geometry, and again, maybe I can give you some of these pictures, is that all of the sacred sites in the southwest, moving out from Silbury Hill, the actual distance from sacred site to sacred site, if you were to draw a line between these two sacred sites emanating out from Silbury Hill, this central mound, the base of every single one of these lines that you would draw between the sacred sites is actually a perfect isosceles triangle. And so you have, hello?
Yeah, I'm still here.
And so, yeah, you have actually spirals moving out. If you were to draw the lines and connect the dots of the sacred sites around Silbury Hill and around the whole of the southwest, you actually get spiraled lines made of straight lines connecting all these places. And as I said, the base of every single one of these triangles is an isosceles triangle. So it shows a huge amount of in-depth cooperation between these builders of ancient times, the Celts, and this period. And so what Tom has shown is that the original geometry has been kind of tapped into, and the geometries of the churches themselves, I mean, we can go into after kind of the actual shape and geomancy of a church structure.
Yes.
He's found that from Bath and Wells Cathedral, there is actually two huge geometric kind of ribbons which kind of come out from them and connect to every single church within the southwest. And this geometry of the churches is kind of overlaid over the Silbury Hill geometry of the same concentric spiraled lines which move out from Silbury Hill. But what you find is when you add in the geometry of Silbury Hill spirals and all of the surrounding sacred Celtic sites, and you overlay the churches over the top of this, you actually get a perfect vortex, because the spirals on the Celtic ones were going anti-clockwise.
Yes.
And the new geometry of the churches is going clockwise. So the two systems integrate, but also it shows that certain churches that would have been powerful in early Christianity in Britain, that the actual building of all the other churches was done again with a lot of cooperation and a lot of working together, the same as the ancient Celtic site.